The scorching African sun beat down mercilessly, baking the cracked earth into a harsh, unforgiving landscape. Across this desolate expanse, a ghostly figure moved with an almost supernatural determination. It was a lioness, but barely recognizable as the majestic hunter she once was. Her ribs protruded starkly beneath a dusty matted coat, her eyes hollow, reflecting an agony that went beyond mere hunger. Every step was an ordeal, each footfall a fresh stab of pain. Thorny acacia bushes, usually navigated with graceful ease, now tore at her flesh, leaving crimson streaks on her already bleeding paws. She pushed onward, her head low, a guttural rasp escaping her throat with each labored breath. What drove such a creature so close to the brink of collapse through such hostile terrain? What powerful unseen force compelled her to endure this relentless torture, her very life ebbing away with every drop of blood she left on the parched ground? And what creature, moving with an almost serene, unsettling calmness, was she following? The mystery was as palpable as the heat haze shimmering above the horizon. Thousands of miles away from his comfortable American life, a young man named Alex was grappling with his own set of challenges, though of a vastly different nature. Alex, a wildlife conservation photographer barely out of his 20s, was on a solo assignment in a remote, drought-stricken corner of East Africa. He was an idealist, his passion for protecting the wild burning bright, tempered by a meticulous professionalism. His camp, a simple but well-equipped setup, was perched precariously near one of the region's last dwindling water sources, a muddy, shrinking puddle that served as a desperate magnet for all forms of life. His face, tanned and dust-streaked, held the focused intensity of someone deeply committed to his calling. Every lens, every battery, every dehydrated meal in his pack was chosen with extreme care, anticipating the harsh realities of documenting a world teetering on the edge. He had arrived weeks ago, full of the usual optimism, but the landscape had quickly disabused him of any romantic notions. The drought, far worse than anticipated, was tightening its grip like a suffocating shroud. He spent his days meticulously documenting the grim reality, skeletal carcasses dotting the plains, once bustling areas eerily silent, and the desperate gauntness of the few survivors. The most unsettling sight was the uneasy truce at the waterhole. Predators and prey, usually locked in an eternal dance of life and death, now congregated with a shared, desperate thirst, their instincts dulled by exhaustion and dehydration. The usual rules of the wild seemed suspended, replaced by a universal agonizing need for survival. One sweltering afternoon, through the powerful zoom of his telephoto lens, Alex spotted her. A lone lioness, her emaciated form stark against the pale earth. She moved with a halting gait, favoring her front left paw. Her vulnerability was heart-wrenching, a raw display of suffering that pierced through Alex's professional detachment. His immediate impulse was to help, a primal urge warring with the strict, unyielding code of non-interference that governed wildlife observation. He was here to document, not to intervene. Yet watching her, he felt a profound sense of helplessness. Then something shifted. The lioness, after a moment of agonizing indecision, began to move with a renewed, almost desperate purpose. Her eyes, formerly glazed with pain, now fixed on a distant point. Alex adjusted his lens, curiosity piqued. Following her gaze, he saw him, a large male lion, moving with an unhurried, almost regal pace, seemingly oblivious to the chaos of the drought. His behavior was unusually calm, purposeful, a stark contrast to the desperation surrounding him. He wasn't hunting, he seemed to be leading, and the injured lioness, summoning strength she surely didn't possess, was following him with an unwavering, almost blind trust. This wasn't a typical interaction. This wasn't a hunt. This was something else entirely, something profound and deeply compelling. Alex felt an immediate pull, an instinct that this scene was far more than just a struggle for survival. It was a story yearning to be told, a narrative woven from pain, hope, and an unknown destination. He swung his camera bag onto his shoulder, the weight of his equipment suddenly feeling light, and began his own careful pursuit, determined to document this extraordinary journey, no matter where it led. Before we delve deeper into this incredible heartbreaking journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more untold stories from the wild. The lioness, a ghostly silhouette against the perpetual haze of dust and heat, continued her excruciating pilgrimage, each step a testament to an unimaginable will. Alex, tucked away at a respectful distance, maintained his vigil, his camera lens a desperate extension of his own burning curiosity. He meticulously tracked the pair, the male moving with a languid purpose, the lioness following with a desperate hobbled gait. Her bleeding paws, now etched into the parched earth, painted a crimson trail, a grim roadmap of her suffering. Every few minutes she would falter, her flanks heaving, only to gather her strength once more, her eyes fixed on the broad, muscular form of the male ahead. Alex's heart ached with each visible collapse and miraculous resurgence. The terrain, already unforgiving, began to escalate its assault. What started as relatively open scrubland twisted into a labyrinth of gnarled, thorny bushes, their spiky branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Rocky outcrops, sharp and unforgiving, jutted from the cracked earth, forcing the lioness to pick her way with agonizing slowness. Parched riverbeds, once arteries of life, now lay like skeletal remains, filled with loose stones and dust devils. The relentless African sun, a merciless orb in the sky, beat down with an intensity that sucked the moisture from the very air, turning every breath into a rasp. Alex, despite his water and sun protection, felt the oppressive weight of it all, a crushing reminder of the harsh reality these animals faced daily. He adjusted his wide-brimmed hat, the sweat stinging his eyes, and focused his lens, determined not to miss a single agonizing step of the lioness's journey. What truly baffled Alex, and what kept him glued to this unfolding drama, was the male lion's utterly uncharacteristic behavior. Predators, especially males, were typically territorial, often aggressive, and certainly not prone to patiently leading an injured, unrelated female. Yet this male exhibited no aggression whatsoever. He would periodically pause, glancing back, almost as if waiting for the lioness to catch up. There was a deliberate, almost protective quality to his movements. He seemed less like a random male she was following out of desperation for any sign of survival, and more like a guide leading her with a specific unspoken intent. Alex had seen countless lion dynamics in his career, but this defied every textbook definition. This wasn't a hunt, nor was it a courtship. It was something profoundly different, something he couldn't yet name. As the hours bled into a long, arduous afternoon, Alex's emotional investment grew, deepening with every painful lurch of the lioness. He found himself whispering encouragement, his own thirst and fatigue momentarily forgotten. The ethical dilemma gnawed at him, observing versus helping. The strict code of non-interference was ingrained in him, a fundamental tenet of wildlife conservation photography. But watching her teeter on the brink of collapse, her body screaming for rest, her spirit still defiantly pushing forward, tested his resolve to its breaking point. Her raw suffering was palpable. A silent scream echoed across the desolate landscape. He saw the desperation, yes, but beneath it, a fierce, almost incandescent determination. It wasn't just survival driving her, it was something far more profound, a primal force. Through his observations, Alex began piecing together fragmented clues, forming a nascent theory. The lioness's unwavering focus, her almost trance-like resolve to follow the male, suggested a motivation beyond immediate sustenance for herself. Her emaciated frame indicated she hadn't hunted successfully in days, perhaps weeks. Yet she wasn't pursuing prey. She was pursuing a path, a destination. He speculated about cubs hidden away somewhere, perhaps abandoned or waiting for her return, or perhaps a lost pride, a last sanctuary in this unforgiving wilderness. It was a final, desperate hope that fueled her, a purpose so deeply rooted that it transcended her pain and starvation. He knew with a chilling certainty that whatever lay at the end of this harrowing journey would either bring a semblance of peace or plunge her into an even deeper despair. The male lion held the key to her fate, and Alex, a silent witness, was powerless but compelled to follow. The parched landscape offered no sanctuary. Each weary step the injured lioness took brought her deeper into a volatile territory, a mosaic of hidden dangers. Alex, through his powerful telephoto lens, could discern the fresh tracks of hyenas crisscrossing the dusty earth, their distinctive loping gait leaving an unsettling pattern. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the unseen presence of leopards, their elusive predatory scent a warning to all who ventured close. This wasn't merely a journey, it was a desperate gauntlet, each mile a gamble against starvation, exhaustion, and the ever-present threat of other apex predators. The male lion, surprisingly, seemed acutely aware of these lurking dangers, his own movements precise and deliberate, as he navigated the hostile environment. Alex found himself pushed to his absolute limits, both physically and emotionally. Capturing this unfolding drama without influencing it was an immense undertaking. He moved like a ghost, a silent observer in the brutal theater of the wild, his body often contorted into uncomfortable positions for hours, camouflaged by sparse bushes and rocky outcrops. Food and water became secondary to the narrative he was committed to documenting. The sun, a malevolent eye in the vast African sky, beat down relentlessly, sapping his strength, yet he persisted, driven by an almost obsessive need to understand the profound connection he was witnessing. He remembered earlier assignments, moments when the sheer scale of suffering in the wild had threatened to overwhelm him, but never had he encountered such raw, unyielding determination in the face of such profound physical degradation. A grim memory resurfaced, a drought years ago in Botswana, where he had photographed a lone elephant stubbornly guarding the carcass of its calf for days, refusing to leave, a stark portrait of grief and loss. The lioness's plight, though different, resonated with that same visceral, heartbreaking perseverance. He thought of the constant, often losing battles fought by conservationists against poaching, habitat loss, and the devastating impacts of climate change. The harsh realities of nature, red in tooth and claw, were often romanticized, but Alex knew the deeper truth. It was a relentless struggle for survival, punctuated by moments of breathtaking beauty and unimaginable sorrow. The male lion, once a perplexing enigma, began to assume a clear role as a guide. There was a subtle shift in his demeanor, an almost paternal protectiveness in how he occasionally lagged, nudging the frail lioness forward with an almost imperceptible movement of his head, or choosing a path around a known hyena den. Alex observed him, waiting patiently at the edge of thickets, ensuring the lioness made it through before continuing. On one occasion, the male stopped at a barely discernible depression in the baked earth, a place where a tiny muddy puddle had formed after a brief localized shower days earlier. He merely stood there, looking back at the staggering lioness, a silent invitation. She approached, her tongue rasping against the brackish water, taking a few desperate gulps before collapsing beside it. It was a calculated act, a deliberate leading, and Alex felt a chill run down his spine. This was no random encounter. This male was actively assisting her, defying every expectation of lion behavior in such dire circumstances. The lioness, however, was rapidly fading. Every muscle in her body screamed defiance against the inevitable. Her labored breaths rasped in the oppressive heat, and her gaunt frame seemed to shrink further with each passing hour. Alex zoomed in, capturing the horrific detail of her paws, now a raw, bloody mess, the pads torn and infected from the endless march over thorns and sharp rocks. Each photograph he took was a testament to her agony, yet somehow also to her unwavering spirit. The emotional impact of what he was witnessing solidified with every click of his camera, painting a vivid, harrowing picture of a mother's last desperate journey. He knew with a chilling certainty that her time was running out, and whatever secret propelled her forward, it was reaching its tragic crescendo. The lioness, now moving with a jerky, almost mechanical motion, still possessed an uncanny focus on the male's retreating form. Alex, his heart aching with each agonizing step she took, noticed something profoundly significant during one of her brief, stumbling pauses. As she lowered herself to the dusty ground, her flanks heaving, her belly was unmistakably distended, her mammary glands swollen and prominent. A jolt went through him. It wasn't just about her survival, it was about the survival of her offspring. Her relentless, impossible journey, the bleeding paws, the refusal to surrender, it coalesced into a singular, undeniable truth. She was a mother, desperate to reach her cubs, or perhaps lead them to something. The revelation hit him with the force of a physical blow, deepening the tragedy and elevating her struggle to an almost mythic level of maternal sacrifice. This was not merely the instinct to live, but the primal, all-consuming drive to protect her young, even at the cost of her own life. His gaze now sharpened, looking for any other clues connecting the male to this unfolding drama. He observed the male lion, no longer just a cryptic guide, but a key player in this heartbreaking saga. After one particularly arduous stretch through a dense thicket of acacia, the male turned, not merely pausing, but waiting, his eyes fixed on the struggling lioness. As she finally emerged, Thorn snagging her tattered fur, the male approached her slowly, deliberately. In a gesture that defied the usual, often harsh dynamics of the wild, he nudged her gently with his head, a soft nuzzle that spoke volumes. It was not aggression nor dominance, but a tender, almost comforting touch. Alex's mind raced. Could this male, this stoic, unwavering leader, be the father or an uncle, a protective elder within her pride? The familiar aloofness and territoriality of male lions, especially during such lean times, made this tenderness extraordinary. It suggested a familial bond, a shared purpose beyond individual survival. The male, it seemed, wasn't just leading her, he was guiding her home, or to what remained of it. The male lion's path, which had seemed meandering at times, now took on a stark, undeniable linearity. He moved with a renewed sense of urgency, his massive paws kicking up dust as he headed directly towards a cluster of ancient granite boulders, half hidden by a tangle of thorny scrub. It was a place Alex had noted on his maps, an area known for potential den sites due to its natural crevices and protective overhangs. This wasn't a choice of convenience, it was a destination. The male was leading the lioness with an almost a GPS-like precision, straight to a specific spot, a sanctuary camouflaged by nature itself. This had to be it. This had to be the hidden den where her cubs awaited, or where she hoped to find them. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture that was both breathtakingly beautiful and utterly devastating. The stakes had now escalated far beyond what Alex had initially comprehended. If there were cubs, they were likely in an even more precarious state than their mother, hidden away, vulnerable to dehydration, starvation, and the predatory gaze of scavengers. The male lion's role was no longer just about guidance, it was critical, a last desperate hope for the continued existence of this tiny family unit. Every movement, every decision now carried the weight of life and death for these helpless young ones. The male's unwavering resolve and the lioness's incredible endurance were all directed towards this singular, paramount objective: saving their cubs. Alex felt an overwhelming surge of emotion, a desperate ache in his chest. His practiced neutrality, his adherence to the strict ethics of non-interference, were being brutally tested. The image of those unseen cubs, dependent on their dying mother and this enigmatic male, filled him with an almost unbearable sense of responsibility. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, silently pleading for a miracle, for some unforeseen twist of fate that would spare these innocent lives from the harsh realities of the drought. The narrative unfolding before him was no longer just a story to document. It was a profound, personal crisis of conscience. He could only watch, document, and hope, his soul already scarred by the raw pain of their struggle. The male lion suddenly stopped, a low rumbling groan emanating from his chest, a sound that rippled through the oppressive stillness of the afternoon. He turned his massive head, his gaze fixed on a dense thicket of acacia trees, where the branches intertwined to form a nearly impenetrable wall. The lioness, now a mere shadow of her former self, staggered forward, her vision blurring, her body screaming for rest. She managed a final monumental effort, collapsing just outside the hidden entrance, her ragged breath rattling in her throat. Alex watched, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, his telephoto lens steady, capturing every agonizing detail. The male approached her, his steps deliberate, then let out that same guttural rumble again, a sound that seemed to vibrate with both sorrow and a strange, profound comfort. Suddenly, from the depths of the thorny den, a tiny tentative movement, then another. Two small, emaciated lion cubs, barely able to coordinate their fragile limbs, stumbled out into the harsh light. They were incredibly small, their fur dull and dusty, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and an instinctual pull towards the sound of the male. They looked first at their collapsed mother, their little noses twitching, then tentatively, with unsure steps, they began to approach the massive male. Alex felt a wave of profound sorrow wash over him. They were so heartbreakingly vulnerable, so completely dependent. The male lion, with a gentleness that contradicted his immense power, nudged the two tiny cubs towards their mother, a silent command for them to be close. He then did something that completely stunned Alex. With immense effort, his powerful paws began to dig methodically at the entrance of the den, not into the soft earth, but at a specific spot. Alex, through the incredible magnification of his telephoto lens, could discern something else within the shadows of the crevice, something the male seemed intent on unearthing. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Slowly, carefully, the male lion uncovered a third lifeless cub. Its small body was withered, a tragic testament to the drought's merciless grip, his tiny form already stiff and cold. There was no visible injury, only the cruel signature of starvation and dehydration. The male, with painstaking tenderness, nudged the deceased cub with his nose, then began to scrape earth and leaves over its small form, a silent, poignant act of burial. It was a private, devastating moment of mourning, performed under the indifferent gaze of the unforgiving African sun. The lioness, her eyes glazed with exhaustion and perhaps a deeper sorrow, watched the entire scene, a silent witness to the profound tragedy that had befallen her family. The male lion finished his somber task, his shoulders hunched, his head lowered. He then turned his massive form towards the two remaining cubs, nudging them gently once more, this time towards the collapsed lioness. It was as if he wanted them to have one last, fleeting moment of connection with their mother. Then, in an act that defied all biological understanding, he carefully lay down beside the lioness, utterly spent, his chest heaving with exertion. He positioned himself in a way that offered his own body to the cubs. The two tiny survivors, their instincts overwhelming, stumbled towards him, pressing themselves against his flank, and incredibly began to try and suckle at his chest, futilely seeking nourishment from a male who had none to give. His sacrifice was silent, yet spoke volumes of an unimaginable depth of care and a bond that transcended the harsh realities of the wild. The male lion, a beacon of improbable resilience in this desolate landscape, endured his self-imposed vigil, a silent guardian over the two remaining cubs. His massive frame, once radiating raw power, now sagged with exhaustion, yet he would not yield. He allowed the tiny, bewildered creatures to nuzzle against his rough fur, their desperate attempts to suckle from him heartbreakingly futile, but he offered what comfort he could. Periodically he would lower his great head and meticulously lick their small, soft bodies, an instinctively tender gesture that transcended the harsh realities of their existence. It was a raw, visceral act of care, a deep connection forged in the crucible of loss and desperation. Alex, hidden by distance and camouflage, recorded every agonizing detail, his lens capturing the stark contrast between the male's immense power and his profound, gentle tenderness. He knew that this was not just an animal reacting. This was a being driven by something akin to sorrow and a deep-seated commitment. The lioness, lying prone beside her protector and her last remaining offspring, finally surrendered to the inevitability that had stalked her for days. With a final, almost imperceptible tremor, she managed to lift her head fractionally, her clouded eyes seeking out her cubs. One last weak nuzzle, a whisper of maternal love, brushed against their fuzzy heads before her breathing, already so shallow, faded completely. The stillness that descended was absolute, profound. The weight of her journey, the thorn-pierced paws, the agonizing hunger, all dissolved into the great silence of the African plains. Life had departed, leaving only a gaunt form, a testament to an extraordinary tragic will. Witnessing this agonizing culmination, Alex felt a profound, almost physical ache in his chest. The carefully constructed wall of professional detachment he had built over years of documenting nature's brutal truths crumbled. Tears, hot and uncontrollable, streamed down his face, blurring his vision. The sheer enormity of the drought, the lioness's incredible heartbreaking journey, and the male lion's silent, utterly selfless sacrifice overwhelmed him completely. His hands trembled violently, threatening to dislodge his camera, but he forced himself to hold steady, to continue documenting this raw, unfiltered monument to survival and love. This was not just a story, it was an elegy, deeply etched into the parched earth. The male lion, now the sole guardian, remained steadfast. He sat beside the deceased lioness and the two tiny vulnerable cubs, his gaze sweeping the horizon. Already, the first harbingers of nature's brutal efficiency were appearing. Vultures, mere specks against the vast blue, began to circle, their presence a grim promise of what was to come. A low, guttural rumble emanated from the male, a sound not of aggression, but of profound echoing loss, a mournful roar that rippled across the silent plains, a lament for his mate and the life that could have been. It was a sound that spoke of grief, of defiance, and of an unyielding resolve born of despair. In that moment of stark revelation, Alex finally understood the full depth of what he had witnessed. This was no mere coincidence, no random act of nature. The male lion had not simply been tolerating the lioness, he had been actively leading her, guiding her towards her hidden den, knowing with an ancient wisdom that her time was precariously short. He had led her there so she could experience one final precious moment with her cubs, a bittersweet farewell. And now he had accepted the impossible mantle of protection in her absence, a testament to an unspoken, profound bond that transcended instinct, painting a vivid picture of loyalty and devotion in the face of insurmountable odds. This male lion, once a perplexing figure, had revealed himself as a pillar of unwavering courage and love. The male lion, though a magnificent and formidable creature, was visibly weakening himself, a consequence of the relentless drought and his unwavering vigil. His ribs had become more prominent, his movements slower, betraying the immense toll this tragedy had taken on his powerful frame. The two tiny cubs, still utterly dependent, were now in grave danger, their survival hanging by the thinnest of threads. Starvation and dehydration loomed large, a relentless threat from which their father, no matter his devotion, could not indefinitely shield them. The vultures, growing bolder, swirled lower, a grim reminder of the predators that would soon be drawn to the scent of vulnerability and death. Alex knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that these cubs, even under the male's valiant protection, could not survive long in such a harsh, unforgiving environment. Their days, perhaps even hours, were numbered. Alex found himself standing at the most significant ethical crossroads of his entire career, a moment that would forever define his understanding of conservation and his role within it. Every fiber of his professional being screamed against interference. The foundational rule of wildlife photography, indeed of conservation itself, was non-intervention. Observe, document, but never alter the natural course of events. Yet to adhere to that rule now felt like a betrayal of everything he believed in. Not interfering meant certain agonizing death for these two innocent cubs, a death he had painstakingly witnessed their mother fight against with every ounce of her being, and their father was now valiantly but futilely attempting to prevent. He weighed the immeasurable consequences of intervention against the harsh, brutal reality of natural selection, a force that, in these extreme circumstances, seemed less like a balance and more like an executioner. This was no ordinary struggle. This was an anomaly, an extreme manifestation of an ecosystem in crisis. The unprecedented drought had pushed these incredible creatures beyond their natural limits. It wasn't just a matter of survival of the fittest. It was a mass extinction event playing out before his very eyes. The profound sacrifice of the lioness, her thorn-pierced journey, and the male lion's heartbreaking loyalty were extraordinary. They had earned in Alex's mind a chance. With a deep shuddering breath, he made the agonizing, career-altering decision to intervene. He justified it not as a violation of natural law, but as a necessary humane response to an unnatural disaster. This was not about saving individuals from minor hardships. It was about acknowledging the broader context of an ecosystem under extreme, human-exacerbated stress and offering a sliver of hope where all hope seemed lost. His hands, still trembling from the emotional onslaught, moved with a newfound purpose as he reached for his satellite phone. He knew exactly who to call. Punching in the number for a local, reputable wildlife rescue team he had worked with on previous, less dramatic occasions, he spoke quickly, concisely, his voice strained but firm. He explained the dire situation, relaying the exact coordinates of the pride's tragic resting place. He described the male lion's unusual behavior, his fiercely protective stance, and the cub's profound vulnerability, emphasizing the urgency required. He knew that time was of the essence. Every second counted. While waiting for the rescue team to arrive, which he knew would take some hours given the remote location, Alex began to implement a cautious, temporary plan of his own. He slowly, deliberately moved his robust safari vehicle, positioning it to create a subtle protective barrier around the male and the cubs. He maintained a respectful distance, careful not to alarm the already stressed male, but strategically placing the vehicle to deter any opportunistic hyenas or other scavengers that might be drawn closer by the scent of death and vulnerability. He activated all his cameras, ensuring every angle was covered, not just as documentation but as a silent vigil, standing guard alongside the grieving king of the savannah. The sun, relentlessly descending, began to cast long, ominous shadows across the plains, further intensifying the sense of dread and the desperate race against time. The male lion remained vigilant, a stoic sentinel against the encroaching threats. But the harsh reality was undeniable. He was visibly weakening, his gaunt frame a stark indicator of his own prolonged struggle in the unforgiving drought. The two tiny cubs, now solely dependent on him, faced an impossible battle against starvation, dehydration, and the myriad opportunistic predators drawn by the scent of death and vulnerability. Alex knew with chilling certainty they could not survive long on their own, even under the male's fierce, unwavering protection. Their fate hung by the thinnest of threads. Alex was at the most significant ethical crossroads of his career, a precipice of profound moral conflict. Every fiber of his professional being recoiled at the thought of interference, of breaking the sacred rule of non-intervention that was the bedrock of wildlife conservation. Yet the alternative was an almost guaranteed agonizing death for these innocent creatures. He weighed the consequences, the potential ripple effects of his actions against the certainty of their demise if he stood idly by. This wasn't a typical scenario of natural selection. This was an ecosystem under catastrophic stress, exacerbated by forces far beyond the wild's inherent brutality. The extraordinary circumstances, the lioness's indomitable spirit, and the male lion's heartbreakingly futile efforts tipped the scales. The decision was agonizing, but ultimately clear. Driven by the profound sacrifice he had witnessed and a deep-seated conviction that humanity bore some responsibility for the environmental crises pushing these animals to the brink, Alex decided to intervene. He rationalized it not as meddling with nature, but as a necessary, compassionate response to an extraordinary crisis, a small act of rectification in a world increasingly out of balance. He would break the rules, not casually, but with a heavy heart and a clear conscience for the sake of these last remnants of a family's tragic struggle. Without hesitation, he retrieved his satellite phone, his fingers flying across the keypad to dial the emergency number for a local wildlife rescue team. His voice, though strained with emotion, was clear and precise as he explained the dire situation. He gave them the exact coordinates, detailing the male lion's unprecedented protectiveness and the cub's extreme vulnerability, emphasizing the urgency required. He painted a vivid picture of the scene, hoping to convey the profound significance of the animals involved. While waiting for the team's arrival, Alex took cautious, deliberate steps to create a temporary, precarious perimeter of safety around the male and cubs. He carefully maneuvered his vehicle, positioning it as a subtle barrier against other potential threats, though always maintaining a respectful, non-threatening distance to avoid alarming the magnificent male. He observed the male who, despite his grief, remained acutely aware of his surroundings, his eyes scanning for any new danger. Alex felt a silent bond of understanding with the creature, a shared hope for the impossible. Eventually, the soft hum of an approaching vehicle broke the stillness, signaling the arrival of the wildlife rescue team. They were equipped with tranquilizer darts, a transport cage, and the quiet professionalism that comes with facing such heart-wrenching scenes regularly. Alex guided them carefully, reiterating the male lion's unusual protectiveness, cautioning them to move with utmost respect and gentleness. The rescue operation commenced with precision. The male lion, exhausted and weakened, was gently tranquilized, his mighty form falling into a peaceful slumber. This allowed the team to safely retrieve the two tiny cubs, who were immediately examined by the accompanying veterinarian, given vital hydration, and quickly placed into a specialized transport cage. The two precious cubs, a fragile beacon of hope, were successfully transported to a dedicated wildlife rehabilitation center, their journey of survival continuing under expert care. The male lion, slowly rousing from the tranquilizer, remained near the deceased lioness, a poignant tableau of loss and loyalty etched into the landscape. The rescue team observed him for a time, ensuring his complete recovery and well-being before respectfully leaving him to his solitary vigil of mourning. Alex returned to his own camp, the silence deafening after the emotional intensity of the past days. He meticulously reviewed his photographs, each image a powerful testament to the lioness's indomitable spirit, the male lion's heartbreaking loyalty, and the brutal yet beautiful dance of life and death in the wild. He compiled his footage and a detailed report, sending it to the Conservation Trust. The story, he knew, would become a powerful symbol of the devastating impacts of climate change and drought, but also of the extraordinary bonds that exist within nature and the desperate need for human empathy and intervention. Reflecting on the raw, unvarnished truth he had witnessed, Alex was more convinced than ever of the ongoing struggle against environmental degradation and the critical importance of human intervention when nature's delicate balance is so profoundly disrupted. This wasn't about playing God, it was about acknowledging humanity's role in the imbalance and offering a hand where possible. He resolved to use his voice, his camera, and his story to stress the urgent need for continued awareness and unwavering support for conservation efforts globally. This story is a stark reminder of the wild's profound fragility and its enduring power. What do you think about Alex's decision to intervene? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more stories that will change the way you see our magnificent planet. Next week, we explore the surprising resilience of coral reefs in the face of warming oceans.